There's a new boss in Oakland who will probably do the job all right. But on today's episode on Locked On MLB, we take a look back at who the best prospects in baseball were 10 years ago and look at a potential lost opportunity in a spectacular career. It'll make sense. Let's start the show.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Mark Kotsay, who is now in charge of the A's. I'm going to look back at a fellow graduate of Washington State University and think about what could have been, even though what actually did happen was pretty terrific. And again, as I mentioned, we're going to go back in time 10 years ago to see who the highly touted prospects were. A few of them were dead on. A few of them weren't. It shows you how perilous the prospect game could be. Thank you for making Locked On MLB your first listen, as we're available on all your free podcasting platforms. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at Locked On MLB Pod. Same handle for Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, not on Twister. If you want to play me in Twister, you know what? You got to come to here, the luxurious Locked On MLB studios in Palo Alto, California, and challenge me to a game of Twister. But if you want to follow me on Twitter, follow me at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. So just quickly looking over the piece of news, I got a couple of people, because I've done a lot of stuff on the A's. I was a guest host on a couple episodes of Locked On A's. We've been doing some A's-centric stuff there, and I've had more than one person say that I took so much time, practically two episodes, talking about Buck Showalter becoming the new manager of the Mets. Why did I totally ignore Mark Kotsay becoming the new manager of the A's? Well, generic white guy becomes manager of team and becomes totally interchangeable. That's the cynical way of saying it. The A's are probably going to do a massive rebuild, which is the reason why beloved manager Bob Melvin took one look around and said, "Check, please," and found himself heading to San Diego. That's another reason. This is a completely understandable and equally unremarkable hiring. Mark Kotsay, it's not an outrageous hiring. There are some hirings that I have personally found outrageous. When you put someone in the managerial seat without coaching experience, I think that's crazy. Personally, I think you have to have some managerial experience. There are a lot of minor league managers out there who know how to manage a team, know that they're the ins and outs of managing a team, but you at least have to have had experience in the coaching situation. And Mark Kotsay has that. Mark Kotsay, he's one of these players. He was he was considered to be the single best college player in the game. Now, we're going to be talking about in today's episode, this was completely unplanned, but for those of you who know me, and I know I do, I've received one master's degree from Washington State University, and I'm working on a second one through Cal State Fullerton. And we're going to be talking about a Cal State Fullerton grad here. And in the next segment, we're going to talk about a Washington State University grad. So in some ways, we're going rah-rah siskumba. My other degree was from New York University. Good luck finding a baseball player from NYU. But that being said, he was the best college player in the game. He won the Golden Spikes Award while playing for Cal State Fullerton and helped my beloved Titans win the College World Series. My beloved Titans. And so when you have a player like that, this is, that's the college baseball equivalent of winning the Heisman Trophy. And yet the Golden Spikes winner does not always translate into superstardom. If you take a look at the Golden Spike Awards over the years, you have, people who a lot of them turned into, good players with good careers. Bob Horner had a good career. Tim Wallach had a very good career, another Cal State Fullerton grad. Terry Francona was okay, turned into a Hall of Fame manager. Mike Fuentes, Augie Schmidt didn't amount to much in the major leagues. Will Clark became a star. Dave Magadan, Oddibe McDowell, Robin Ventura. These are all people who became good, solid players. Jason Varitek, Darren Dreifert. I mean, Alex Fernandez. Has there been a legit superstar? JD Drew, very good. Pat Burrell, nice long career. Mark Pryor. Okay. Lincecum, Price. Boom. There you go. Buster Posey. Boom. Strasburg and Harper. Okay, there you go. Then Chris Bryant. So you have had some players who have become big stars, but it's not the guaranteed superstar factory that you would expect the best college player in the game to be. All right, but Mark Kotsay, Cal State Fullerton grad, obviously they only accept the best and brightest to Cal State Fullerton. But he had a career. He played for a bunch of years. He was on the 1997 Marlins team, but he only played 14 games and was not on the World Series roster when they won the World Series. Bounced around between the Marlins, the Padres, played for the A's, hit an inside the park home run in the playoffs. The one division series that the A's won under Billy Beane in 2006. Played for the Red Sox when they went to the playoffs in 2008. Played for the Padres a couple times and was in the front office of the Padres, was a coach for the Padres, and since 2015 has been a mainstay in the Oakland coaching staff and is obviously someone who knows the organization well. So look, it's fine. He's an organizational guy, probably knows all the players and probably knows that they're going to rip this team down and probably knows that this is a complete rebuild and that he's there to mind the store while this happens. And, if the A's keep him there for a decade, like they kept Bob Melvin there for a decade, fine. But I think the expectations are so low for a Mark Kotsay and the Oakland A's going into the 2022 season after the disappointing finish to 2021. When the lockout's over, they still have a bunch of the players, including Olsen, who everyone thought they would have traded by now. I have a feeling when the lockout's over, there's going to be a giant for sale sign, which is odd because they're also trying to convince everyone to build a new stadium for them, something the A's have been looking for since they left Philadelphia. So there's a strange contradiction of the A's looking to rebuild for the future, both physically build and build a team to stick into the new ballpark. That's probably their mindset, that if this ballpark does indeed come through, it's going to take a couple of years to build the park and put a competitive team in that park. Fine. But, I was asked, why didn't I talk about this? There's not much to talk about. He's a placeholder. He's a George Lazenby. He's there you just keep this seat warm while we do this. You're a good company man. And now you could, bounce your grandkids on your knee and say that I was once a major league manager. Something Chris Chambliss never got a chance to say. Would have been nice if they had done something a little more inspiring, something a little more, take a chance with a different kind of manager or try someone. Well, they got a company man. They got a company man to do the job. Now, what are the expectations for the A's? There's sometimes the A's have had expectations where you think they're going to do really, really well. I picked the A's to win the American League West this year. I picked them ahead of the Astros. The reason I did that, and my reasoning was sound, was that I liked the A's starting pitching. I didn't like the Astros starting pitching. And I thought that the A's were going to win more series 2-3 than, 2-1, you know what I mean? They're going to win more, take 2 out of 3 from teams more often than the Astros would because of their pitching staff. I didn't envision the A's bullpen turning into the house of horrors that they turned into. So all those great opportunities for the A's to do something in the last 10 years probably fell that their lone highlight was winning that series against the Chicago White Sox in the 2020 COVID playoffs. So, yeah, to answer some of your questions, why didn't I talk about Kotsay? Look at it is what it is. He's a smart baseball guy. He's got that really great Fullerton mind. And he comes in, he's probably going to do exactly what he's told. He's probably going to fill out the lineup card as he's told. And the players can look around. Who do we have instead of Bob Melvin? Oh, we got Kotsay. Okay. And chances are there are going to be so many players there that you say, like, oh, man, we are so happy to be here. That whether they're, managed by Mark Kotsay or Mark Hamill, it's not going to make much of a difference to them because the expectations are going to be super low. But sometimes how we predict things are not always the way they turn out to be. Sometimes you make your predictions and you say, well, this is a surefire bet, it's going to turn out this way. And it doesn't turn out that way. Our projections aren't always lined up. In segment 2, we're going to be talking about some of the projections from 10 years ago, including those for the Oakland A's. And it's not always a safe bet to look at what everyone's saying and go along with them. And by the way, if you're going to make any bets, go to BetOnline, which remains your number one spot for all your sports action this season. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, UFC, boxing, right down to your favorite Las Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season or for the 2022 season. Yeah, you're too late to take advantage of those 2021 advantages. No. You got to update your copy and make it 2022. But BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports. So don't wait to take advantage of the amazing offers available, whatever year it is. BetOnline is where the game starts. You mentioned the A's. And I remember in 2012, I, along with many other people, the A's had traded away several players, including 3 relatively young pitchers, Gio Gonzalez, Trevor Cahill, and Andrew Bailey, who looked like they were a nice foundation for a potential winning team in Oakland. They traded all 3 of them before the 2012 season. And it looked disastrous. Like, what are you doing? You dopes. You're trading away young pitching. And it looked like it was going to be a disgrace. And as it turned out, the A's did stumble out of the gate and it looked like, oh, what a horrible team. But some of the young players, including Jared Parker and a couple other players who wound up fitting well with the club, played quite well, thank you very much. And the Texas Rangers, who had just lost back-to-back World Series and seemed hell-bent to make it 3 straight trips to the World Series, and this time they were going to win it, found they had a very unlikely challenger for the West. And the A's wound up leapfrogging the Rangers on the final day of the season and winning the West with a young, hungry, very strange, very unusual team that almost beat the Tigers to move on to the ALCS. Wouldn't that have been interesting if they had gone to face the Yankees and maybe the Giants in the World Series? An unlikely team. It would have made a fantastic sequel to Moneyball. But you can't always project things. But I'm sitting here as the calendar page flipped and we moved to a new year. I started thinking about 2012. That was 10 years ago. By the way, it's going to be my 10th anniversary of doing a regular baseball podcast in October. So it's interesting. I'm going back then. It doesn't seem that long ago to me. But I went to MLB.com and I pulled up the 100 MLB prospects, the top prospects going into the 2012 season. And now that we have a decade between people projecting those prospects and seeing what actually happened, it's interesting to see some of the names that are on here and some of the ones who turn out to be, some of the ones they were dead right about, and some of the ones that they kind of swung and missed about. Now, the number one prospect in baseball, according to MLB.com, going into the 2012 season was Matt Moore. And there was reason for thinking that Matt Moore was going to be this great player. One reason was he was a super young player in 2011, and the Rays put Matt Moore in an unusual spot, which was he was going to start the first game of the playoffs. He had only made one start in his 3 appearances in 2011, but the Rays were absolutely gassed going into the playoffs when they overtook the Red Sox in the final moments of the season. Well, Matt Moore came in that first game against the Rangers and won that game, and stunning the Rangers along the way. He wound up pitching 10 innings in the division series and had an ERA of 0.90. He let up 1 run on a solo home run in his 10 innings pitched and won the first game. And he was 23 years old and looked like he was going to be the next great ace for the Tampa Bay Rays. As it turns out, it wasn't a bad pick. He wound up having a very good 2012 season, was an all-star in 2013, and finished in the top 10 of the Cy Young Award vote. He went through his career. I mean, he pitched a handful of games last year with Philadelphia. He wound up playing for the Giants when they won the wild card in 2016. He's bounced around a little bit, played a little with Texas here, played a little with Detroit there. He's probably going to find a job. He's still in his early 30s and throws left-handed, and people will probably overrate him because he was such a big prospect. But, there he was. He went into the season thinking there's going to be our next big ace. The number 2 prospect was Bryce Harper. As I said, either the most overrated, underrated player of all time or the most underrated, overrated player of all time. I still haven't figured out which. The number 3 prospect going into the 2012 season was a player named Mike Trout. Yep, that's a good top 3 pick. Going through, I'm just going to list down the top 10. I already listed Moore, Harper, and Trout. Julio Teheran, who had some wonderful seasons with Atlanta and a lot of injuries. Shelby Miller, who eventually went to the Braves and was later flipped for Dansby Swanson. You got Manny Machado there, who I think is great. Jurickson Profar, Jameson Taillon, the notorious Trevor Bauer, and Dylan Bundy make up the top 10. The next 10 include Garrett Cole. And then you had a pair of Yankee prospects. Jesus Montero, remember him? He was supposed to be the next Miguel Cabrera. The Yankees probably could have landed Cliff Lee in a deal if they're willing to give up Jesus Montero. Instead, he was flipped for Michael Pineda. Montero never amounted to much, failed some PED tests, and people were throwing ice cream sandwiches at him at a minor league game. The other big Yankee prospect in the top 20 was Manny Benuelos. And Manny Benuelos was supposed to be the next great left-handed pitcher for the Yankees. Never played with the Yankees. He pitched 23 games in the major leagues, 1 season with the Braves, 1 season with the White Sox. Became a career minor leaguer. And you're going to see that some of the names, if you go through, you'll see there's some people who became big stars. The Nolan Arenado's on this list. You'll see Anthony Rendon is on this list. Zach Wheeler's on this list. Francisco Lindor is on this list. Then you saw people who were, nice players, had nice careers. Travis d'Arnaud had a nice career. Martin Perez had a nice career. Carlos Martinez had a nice career. You go all the way down to 35 and you got yourself an MVP in Christian Yelich. And right after him, you have Aroldis Vizcaíno, who bounced around as a middle reliever for the Braves over the years. It's, there's you're going down, there's sometimes you see names that jump out at you. Nick Castellanos at 51, but then you say, where did Mike Olt turn out for the Texas Rangers? You'll see a Gene Segura, you'll see a Jared Cozart and Javier Baez, But then you'll also say, let's see, Mason Williams of the Yankees is there. And it's very difficult. Down the list, you can see Xander Bogaerts all the way down at 76. And you see an Alan Webster, who was traded back and forth as a big, huge prospect and never quite made it in the major leagues at number 79. And all the way down at 100 is Addison Reed, who had a nice career as a major leaguer. Noah Syndergaard is a 95. But then you have Tim Beckham at 92, who was the number one overall pick in the draft and never quite became a star in the major. Had a couple of decent years. If someone told you down at 84 would be George Springer, say that guy was eventually become a World Series MVP. They'd say, you can take that prediction, just stick it in the trash can. Sorry, everybody. But one of the points is you look at this, there are some that are absolute, yes, that person became a great, great prospect, great major leaguer. As I said, there's a couple of MVPs, a couple of perennial all-stars. And then you have Danny Hultzen. Then you have, as I had mentioned, Manny Benuelos was a top 20 prospect in baseball and never made it there. And somewhere down at number 31, you find Mike Montgomery, who became one of the least likely pitchers to earn a save in Game 7 of the World Series. I'm sure he's fine with that. And the ball was caught by Anthony Rizzo, who's, by the way, at number 37. It's hard to pick prospects and to get them right, and I think it's one of the reasons that if you have a chance to get a major leaguer on your team and it's going to cost you a prospect, you almost always have to pull the trigger. I bet if the Rays had put Matt Moore on the trade block, the number of players they'd be able to get from would be staggering. Would that have been a smart move to make, knowing what happened? Of course, this is what I'm bringing up over the last bunch of days of all the hindsight bias. Sure. If you had hindsight bias, you knew that Matt Moore would have a couple of good years and then turn into an okay pitcher, and you can get a superstar from him. Sure, you do it. But then you wouldn't have pulled that trigger if you knew that player was going to become Mike Trout or Bryce Harper or Christian Yelich. So prospects are tough to pick, but we do them. We make predictions and we make projections. And sometimes you have a player who's a superstar in college that doesn't quite make the transition. Sometimes you do. In one instance, someone who went to another college that I went to, I look at them and think, man, we could have had the fascination of a player that we are currently experiencing, and we could have had that start in the late 80s. I'll explain more of what I'm talking about. But first, I'm going to talk about Built Bars. It's the new year. That means New Year's resolutions. If yours is getting fit or eating healthier, make sure to include Built Bar in your plan. It's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easy to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good, you'll want to eat it. Unlike the other protein bars, which can be chalky or waxy or taste like a chemical spill. You want to eat healthy, but sometimes it just gets so boring. Like by week 3, you're thinking, this is just not worth it. Where's the chocolate? Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carb, 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which has about 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and so many net carbs. So here's an idea. If you've got secret treat stashes at home or in the pantry, in the office, or in the car, throw away all the sugary, calorie-filled snacks, replace them with Built Bars. So when you're craving a snack or treat, you're going to reach something that's healthy and tastes incredible. And there's so many flavors to you can choose from. Peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, my personal favorite, raspberry, so many more. In fact, Built Bar is always coming out with new limited time flavors. So check out Built.com often to see what's new. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. I'm going to talk a little bit about a player who had a remarkable career, a really great career, and really kind of left nothing on his proverbial bucket list of players that what he could do in his career. And yet I can't help but think of what could have been. John Olerud was a player. He was born in North Dakota, but he wound up going to Pullman, Washington, to go to the other school where I'm going to get a master's, I got my master's degree from, which is Washington State University. Go Cougs. And he was on the team that got to the College World Series for Washington State, and he was drafted by the Blue Jays after after his wonderful college baseball career. Now, here's the thing: John Olerud went right from Washington State University to the major leagues. He played 17 seasons, beginning in 1989. When I was in high school. He didn't play a minor league game until 2005, when he went to a rehab assignment with the Red Sox. And at that point, I was a father. He played from 89 to 2005. He stretched so many different generations. When he was with the Blue Jays, he was playing with the likes of George Bell. He was playing with the likes of Fred McGriff and Tony Fernandez and Dave Stieb. That era of the Blue Jays is when he made his appearance. When he finished with the Red Sox in 2005, the Red Sox were the defending World Series champion Red Sox. He was in the midst of the A-Rod and Curt Schilling rivalry between those two franchises. This was a guy whose career spanned a lot, and he played for some great teams, including being part of the two Blue Jays World Series champions. He finished third in the MVP race in 1993 when he led the league in hitting, OPS, OPS plus, and doubles, drove in 107 runs, and walked 114 times. He had an on-base percentage of .473 that year. He had an unbelievable season. Frank Thomas won the MVP that year, but Olerud gave him a run for his money. Played on all those great Blue Jays teams. Later landed with the Mets and was on the Met team that got to the NLCS in 1999. Returned to the Pacific Northwest and played in the final two seasons that the Mariners ever played in the postseason, including the 116-win team of 2001, and was a huge contributor to that team. He batted over 300, hit over 21 home runs, and always playing Gold Glove defense. And later, when Jason Giambi was sick in 2004, he went cold turkey off of steroids, and Tony Clark was not filling the job. The Yankees acquired him, and he was the starting first baseman for the Yankees during the, let's call it, memorable 2004 ALCS. And he hope he didn't get too attached to the Yankee side of that rivalry, because in 2005, John Olerud was on the Red Sox and was still a good player. You know, he still had a good, decent batting average, a decent OPS, good OPS plus, but then hung up the spikes after 17 years in the major leagues, really 16 plus, because he only played 6 games in 89. And he was only 36 years old. He probably could have continued playing. Now, everything you could want to do. He was an all-star. He was several times an all-star. He was a Rookie of the Year candidate. He finished in the top 10 of the MVP. He won a pair of World Series rings, was on beloved teams with several different franchises, and he wound up playing in the postseason with how many different franchises? With Blue Jays, Mets, Mariners, Yankees. 5 different franchises he played. Every stop he made, that team went to the playoffs. And he made millions of dollars along the way. What could I possibly be saying that I look at that kind of career and say what could have been? And it's that wonderful kind of career. You know, not a Hall of Famer, but certainly a player who's beloved by several fan bases and impossible to not to root for. Because he also had a great underdog story when he was in college. He had an aneurysm that nearly killed him. And he wound up having brain surgery. And he wound up wearing a helmet even on the field to as protection. And went recovered from the brain surgery to be drafted by the Blue Jays and sent right to the major leagues. So Olerud is a great story. So why do I think of his career and say what could have been? Because he was an outstanding hitter for the Washington State Cougars. He also was their top pitcher. And he was an All-American as a pitcher. Now, I don't like to look at win-loss records, but the guy went 15-0 with 113 strikeouts and was an All-American as a pitcher and as a hitter, as listed by Baseball America. And he continued to dominate. Now, he didn't pitch as well when he was coming back from the brain surgery. But you know what? He was coming back from brain surgery. Maybe that, maybe need a little bit of adjustment. When the Blue Jays drafted him, they put him right at first base. And ultimately, he made Fred McGriff expendable, which is saying something. And which led directly to the trade of McGriff and Tony Fernandez for Roberto Alomar and Joe Carter, which, turned the script for the Blue Jays and helped them win those 2 World Series. The thing that I wonder what could have been is, could he have done what Shohei Ohtani wound up doing? Could he have done that? Could he have become a good pitcher? Could he have become a major league pitcher? And because he played first base, would that have been a situation where even if he was a reliever, if you kept an extra first baseman on your roster, you could bring in Olerud to pitch a few innings, have another first baseman fill in them, and then Olerud go right back to first base when they want to take him out. He was a good enough pitching prospect in college that people were wondering. I was reading Baseball America like crazy in the late 80s, and there were people wondering, is he going to do both? Is he going to be a two-way player? Is he going to be a two-way player? And I've often wondered if it would have worked. Now, Ohtani has turned into a very good pitcher and an outstanding hitter. We don't know if, as we just listed, remember I just listed the 100 best prospects going into the 2012 season, someone could project as a great college pitcher and get bombed. Yes, I said bombed in the major leagues. It doesn't always accurately translate one to the other. That being said, I can't help but wonder. I can't help but wonder what would have happened if it could have worked. Would it have been unlikely? Sure. It's unlikely it happened with Ohtani. And I'm sure after the first season when he had the Tommy John surgery, that there were a lot of people saying, hey, enough with the pitching. Just hit us some home runs. And I'm sure that when you take a look at that team that the Blue Jays had, and I'm just doing off the top of my head, I remember they had Dave Steve, they had Mike Flanagan, they had David Wells, they had Jimmy Key, they had Tom Henke. There was no shortage of good pitchers on that Blue Jays team. There's also no shortage of good hitters for that matter. But I can't help but wonder what would have been. Now, I wonder if he didn't have the brain aneurysm, if he would have continued pitching at the high level he was, if it would have been a serious conversation. I don't know. I wish they could have had a moment where they gave it a shot. Because if Olerud taught us anything, he was a guy who could persevere and beat the odds. And he had a wonderful career along the way. And he checked virtually everything off of a bucket list you could ever want. And yet still I look at it and think, ooh, wouldn't that have been cool if he was also a pitcher? Could have been. He could have been. But he wasn't. And go Cougs, I'm sure he's fine with being a beloved Gold Glove winning all-star, multiple World Series champion millionaire. Another Washington State University success story. Kind of like your pal Sully, as I'm going to be doing this podcast all the time. And we got some interesting topics. And I have, kind of teasing an episode I'm going to be doing later this week, I caught up with the 2 kids who have my old baseball card collection. And I brought them on as a guest, and we had a fun conversation. So That's going to be coming up later this week. And also, if there's any big news that pops up, we'll be on top of it. So thanks so much for making us your first listen, as we're available on all your free podcasting platforms. Hey, how about your second listen? Be Locked On Bets with your boy Q and with expert analysis from Lee Sterling. And they cover all your gambling needs and get you primed to making that big football moolah. Hey, follow us at Locked On MLB Pods. Same handle for Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Looking at the A's managerial decision, thinking about how hard it is to pick the right prospects, and wondering what could have been with John Olerud. This is Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.